Welcome to Global Reports Hub. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more updates. The world watched headlines about the South China Sea, but in a small Palawan village, the crisis was personal. Maria, a mother of 4, gazed at the sea, her husband Carlos somewhere beyond the horizon on their fishing boat. The sea, once their lifeline, now felt like a trap. Chinese Coast Guard ships had become a constant threat, chasing Filipino boats from their own waters. Last month, Carlos came home soaked and shaken after a water cannon attack, his catch lost. Now Beijing's final warning made the danger official. Maria didn't know about international law or the 9-line. She knew only the pain of empty nets and hungry children. Every day Carlos went out was a gamble. Maria packed his lunch with trembling hands, praying for his safety and their future. The conflict wasn't abstract, it was the reason for her anxiety and debt. As the sun set, Maria joined other wives on the shore, scanning the horizon for their loved ones. The world talked of treaties and alliances, but here, it was about survival. Their right to fish, to live, was slipping away. For Maria and her community, this wasn't just news, it was their life. The storm wasn't coming, it was already here. The headlines missed the real story. Families living in fear, livelihoods on the line. The world watched, but Maria's family lived the consequences. Each day brought new uncertainty, and the next chapter was unknown. The sea that once gave life now threatened to take it away. Maria's prayers were for peace, but her reality was a daily struggle. The crisis was no longer distant. It was at their doorstep. For these families, the geopolitical flashpoint was heartbreakingly real. Their story was one of resilience, but also of fear. The world's gaze meant little when survival was at stake. Beijing's statement was blunt: China would now enforce its claims across the entire South China Sea. Unauthorized foreign vessels, including Filipino fishing boats, would be seized and crews detained. The Philippines was given 30 days to withdraw from disputed islands and halt all activities within the 9-line. This was no longer diplomatic posturing, it was an ultimatum. The world was stunned by the aggressive timeline and the abandonment of negotiation. China's message, the era of ambiguity was over, might would make right. The Philippines faced an impossible choice: surrender sovereignty or risk confrontation with a superpower. The 30-day countdown put immense pressure on Manila and its allies. The statement was a calculated test of international resolve. As the clock ticked, the South China Sea became a potential flashpoint for global conflict. The world held its breath. The crisis centers on a map, China's 9-line submitted to the UN in 2009. This sweeping U-shaped line claims nearly 90% of the South China Sea, cutting into the exclusive economic zones of the Philippines and other neighbors. China's claim is rooted in murky history, but now enforced with military might. The 9-line ignores international law, especially UNCLOS, which China signed. Instead of 200 nautical mile zones, China asserts historic rights over vast waters and resources. For Southeast Asian nations, this isn't just a map, it's an existential threat to their sovereignty and future. The conflict is about more than islands. It's about whether rules or raw power will shape the region. The 9-line is the battleground for that question. It's a direct challenge to the international order. The world's response will define the future of the South China Sea. In 2013, the Philippines took China to an international tribunal, challenging the 9-line under UNCLOS. The 2016 ruling was clear. China's historic rights claim had no legal basis. The tribunal found China violated the Philippines' rights and condemned its artificial island building. For a moment, international law seemed to prevail, but China rejected the ruling outright, calling it meaningless and refusing to comply. Instead, Beijing accelerated its military buildup and increased harassment of Filipino fishermen. The tribunal had no power to enforce its decision, only the hope that nations would respect the law. China's defiance exposed the limits of the international system. The Philippines won the legal battle, but China held the ground. The 2016 ruling set the stage for today's crisis. It showed that law alone cannot stop a determined superpower. The world now faces the consequences of that defiance. The stakes have never been higher. The Philippines' security rests on its alliance with the United States, bound by a 1951 mutual defense treaty. U.S. officials say an armed attack on Philippine forces in the South China Sea would trigger the treaty. But what counts as an armed attack in today's gray zone conflict? China's tactics, water cannons, ramming, maritime militias, blur the lines, creating dangerous ambiguity. The U.S. may hesitate to risk war with China over a disputed reef or fishing boat. This uncertainty is exactly what Beijing exploits. The Philippines is caught, relying on US support but unsure if it will come. Some in Manila want a stronger US presence, others fear being drawn into a superpower clash. China's ultimatum is a direct test of the alliance. If Washington wavers, it could embolden China and shake confidence among US allies. The credibility of America's security guarantees is on the line. The region's stability depends on what the US will actually do if conflict erupts. The answer will shape the Indo-Pacific's future. For Manila, the dilemma is existential. The world is watching. For Roberto, a fisherman near the Spratlys, the South China Sea dispute is about survival, not politics. Scarborough Shoal was once his family's lifeline. Now, Chinese ships block the entrance. Water cannons and threats have driven Filipino fishermen away while Chinese trawlers take the catch. Roberto's income has collapsed. Debt and despair have replaced hope. Young men leave the village for city jobs, boats sit idle, and the community spirit fades. The fishermen feel abandoned and powerless, victims of a conflict they never chose. Roberto's story is shared by thousands. Empty nets, empty pockets, and a way of life under threat. China's ultimatum isn't abstract, it's a death sentence for their future. The real cost of the 9-dash line is measured in lost livelihoods and broken families. For Roberto, the crisis is painfully real. The world debates sovereignty, he worries about feeding his children. The stakes are not just national, they're deeply personal. The sea that once sustained them now shuts them out. Their struggle is the human face of the conflict. ASEAN, Southeast Asia's main bloc, should be united against China's claims, but it's divided. Consensus rules mean any member can block action, and China uses economic leverage to keep some silent. Countries like Cambodia and Laos, reliant on Chinese aid, often prevent strong statements. China prefers dealing with nations one-on-one, avoiding a united front. ASEAN's responses are watered down, frustrating claimants like the Philippines and Vietnam. Progress on a code of conduct is slow. China drags out talks to solidify control. The ultimatum tests ASEAN's relevance. Will it find its voice or be sidelined? The crisis could define the future of regional cooperation. The South China Sea is a global economic artery. 1/3 of world shipping, trillions in trade, and vast oil and gas reserves. Disruption here would send shockwaves through the global economy, raising costs and causing shortages. China's 9-dash line claims most of these resources, clashing with its neighbors' rights. For China, control is about more than wealth. It's about power, security, and national pride. Artificial islands serve as military outposts, projecting strength across Asia. The sea is central to China's Belt and Road ambitions and its vision as a global superpower. For Southeast Asian nations, it's about defending sovereignty and economic survival. The dispute is a clash of perspectives. Law versus ambition, survival versus dominance. That's why the South China Sea is so dangerous. The outcome will shape the region and the world. The South China Sea conflict is fought on many fronts, including the battle for global opinion. China's media pushes a narrative of peaceful development and historic rights, while the Philippines exposes aggression with photos and videos. This media war shapes perceptions and influences diplomacy. Meanwhile, military tensions rise. US warships challenge China's claims, and China responds with its own shows of force. The Philippines boost defense ties with the US, Australia, and Japan. China's artificial islands are now military bases, making the region a powder keg. A miscalculation could spark a global crisis, disrupting trade and raising prices worldwide. The world is interconnected. What happens here affects everyone. Peace requires diplomacy, respect for law, and an informed public demanding restraint. The stakes are global, not just regional. The path forward is uncertain, but the need for a peaceful solution is urgent. The world must pay attention. The future of the South China Sea and global stability hangs in the balance.